The glass was halfway to my lips when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated, the room around me warm with candlelight and the faint scent of rosemary from the roast in the center of the table. Daniel and Claire were watching me closely, their own glasses raised. I slipped my hand under the table, shielding the screen from view. One new message from an unknown number. In bold capital letters it read, "Do not drink that. Get up and leave. Tell no one." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My name is Joseph, and if you are wondering why a simple glass of wine could make my heart pound like that, the answer goes back years. Daniel is my younger brother, though for the past decade we might as well have been strangers. We stopped speaking after the brutal arguments over our parents' estate. What began as tense discussions about fairness turned into shouting, accusations, and the kind of words you can't take back. I walked away from the last meeting in a lawyer's office knowing I had lost more than property. I had lost my family. For years, Christmas was just another evening for me. I kept it quiet, alone, with a modest dinner and the old watch my father left me ticking steadily on the mantel. No phone calls, no visits, no "Merry Christmas" messages from Daniel. We lived in separate worlds. That was until 2 weeks ago. I was drinking my morning coffee when my phone rang and Daniel's name appeared on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. When I answered, his voice was warm, warmer than I remembered, but something about it felt practiced, almost like a smile you put on for a photograph. He said, "We've wasted enough time, Joseph. It's Christmas. Let's put the past behind us. Come to dinner. Claire would love to see you." Claire, my sister-in-law, had never exactly hidden her dislike for me. So hearing her name offered as part of the welcome felt strange. Daniel went on, describing their new home, how Claire was preparing a meal you'll never forget, how important it was that we all be together again. I asked when. He answered instantly, "Christmas Eve. 7 o'clock. I told myself I was going out of curiosity, but deep down I knew there was more. Something in his tone, that too smooth, too ready warmth, made me wonder why now. What had changed? Still, I agreed. Part of me wanted to believe this was real reconciliation. Part of me suspected it was something else entirely. And now here I was, at their table, the stem of a crystal glass cool against my fingers, staring at the warning on my phone, wondering if my decision to come tonight had just been the worst one of my life. 10 days before that glass of wine ever touched my hand, I was staring at my phone, wondering why I'd said yes. Daniel's voice still echoed in my head from that call. Smooth, almost gentle, but with an edge I couldn't quite name. "We've wasted enough time, Joseph. It's time to be a family again." He'd never used that word, family, without sounding defensive before. Now it was wrapped in something that felt like sugar, but I wasn't sure if there was poison underneath. We hadn't spoken since the night our parents' estate was divided. What was supposed to be a civil meeting in a lawyer's office had turned into a brawl of words and accusations. He accused me of trying to take more than my share. I accused him of trying to manipulate our mother's wishes. By the time we left that room, we were brothers only in name. The house, the land, the stocks, they were all just paper in the end. The real loss was that we couldn't look at each other without remembering that night. Now here he was, inviting me to Christmas dinner like nothing had happened. I told myself I'd go to see if time had softened him, or maybe to prove that I had moved on. Christmas Eve arrived colder than I expected. Snow crusted the sidewalks as I locked my apartment door. The city streets gave way to highways, and highways gave way to the kind of neighborhoods where every house looked like a magazine cover. By the time I turned into Daniel Street, my old sedan felt out of place among the polished SUVs and luxury sedans lining the driveways. His house, no mansion, stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, 3 stories of stone and glass lit up like something out of a holiday movie. Tall windows glowed golden behind perfect wreaths. The front steps were flanked by planters filled with holly and winterberries. It didn't look like the home of the brother who, last I knew, was scraping together payments for a fixer-upper on the other side of town. Claire opened the door before I even knocked. She looked flawless, silk dress in deep green, hair swept up, smile perfectly placed. "Joseph," she said, as if my name was an unfamiliar word she was practicing. "Come in, you must be freezing." Inside, warmth hit me like a wave, not just from the heat, but from the heavy scent of roasting meat and spiced wine. The foyer gleamed under a chandelier that probably cost more than my car. Every surface shone, every ornament perfectly placed. Then I saw her, an older woman sitting quietly on an armchair near the hall, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Claire's mother, Martha. She was dressed simply in a dark cardigan, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes sharp. When our eyes met, she gave me the smallest nod, polite, but not warm. It was the kind of look that made you feel she already knew something you didn't. Daniel appeared from deeper in the house, grinning like a politician on election night. "Joseph, you made it." He pulled me into a hug that lingered just a second too long, his cologne sharp and unfamiliar. "You look great, brother. Come on, let's get you settled. We've got a lot to catch up on." As we walked through the house, I noticed the framed photos along the hallway. Daniel and Claire on vacation. Daniel cutting a ribbon at what looked like a property opening. Claire at charity galas. Not a single one from our childhood, not even from the years before the estate fight. The dining room was already set, crystal glasses, fine china, silverware arranged with military precision. At the head of the table sat a single empty place. Mine. Daniel clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Tonight's about family, Joseph. Let's enjoy it." I smiled back, but something in me stayed on guard. Because as much as I wanted to believe this was a new beginning, a quiet voice in the back of my mind whispered the same question over and over. Why now? The dining room looked like something out of a magazine. A long mahogany table glowed under the warm light of a crystal chandelier. Silver cutlery lay in perfect alignment on snow, white linen. At the center, a row of candles flickered between arrangements of holly and red berries, their scent mingling with the rich aroma of roast and garlic. Daniel gestured for me to take the seat at the head of the table, the place of honor, while he and Claire took the spots to my right and left. From the moment I sat down, the attention was on me. Claire leaned in, her smile perfectly measured. "So Joseph, how's business these days? Still holding on to all those properties?" The question was casual on the surface, but there was an edge to it. Before I could answer, Daniel chuckled. "Of course he is. My brother has always been good at holding on to what's his." He said it as if it were a compliment, but I felt the weight in his tone. I kept my voice steady. "Business is fine. I keep things simple." Claire's eyes sparkled, though not in a friendly way. "And the bank accounts? Still at the same branch? You know, convenience is everything when you're managing multiple assets." I took a slow sip of water instead of answering. Daniel reached for the bottle of red wine between us. "Come on, let's start this evening right." He filled my glass to the brim before topping up his own. Claire lifted hers, the deep red catching the candlelight. "To family," she said. "To making up for lost time," Daniel added. I clinked glasses and took a small sip. The food was flawless, roast beef so tender it nearly fell apart under my fork, vegetables roasted to perfection, but the conversation kept circling back to me. How many tenants I had in my rental properties. Whether I'd ever considered simplifying my portfolio. If I'd made arrangements for the future of my estate. Each question was dressed in warmth, but underneath I could feel them prodding, measuring. Across the table, Martha sat quietly, barely touching her plate. Her gaze would shift from my face to my wine glass, then back again. Once, when Daniel turned to speak to Claire, I caught her shaking her head, slow, deliberate, before looking down at her hands. Daniel refilled my glass a second time without asking. "You always liked a good vintage," he said, his smile a little too bright. I nodded, though my fingers tightened around the stem. I had learned long ago to be careful when someone was trying too hard to make you relax. Dessert was still in the kitchen when Daniel reached for the bottle again. One more, Joseph. For the years we lost. Claire was already raising her own. The candles flickered between us, shadows dancing across their carefully composed faces. I picked up my glass, the cool stem between my fingers, and lifted it halfway to my lips. And that's when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The vibration in my pocket cut straight through the hum of conversation. I lowered my glass slightly, Daniel's eyes still on me, Claire's smile frozen in place. Sliding my hand beneath the tablecloth, I pulled the phone out just enough to see the screen. One new message from an unknown number. Bold, capital letters staring back at me. Do not drink that. Get up and leave. Tell no one. My chest tightened. I looked up without moving my head. Daniel was pouring himself more wine, Claire adjusting the folds of her dress. Neither of them seemed to notice the way my grip had tightened on my phone. Everything okay? Claire asked sweetly, tilting her head. I think I need to step out for a moment, I said, forcing a casual tone. Daniel frowned, but nodded. Bathrooms down the hall, second door on the left. I stood slowly, my legs heavier than they should have felt after just 2 glasses of wine. The hallway was dim, lit only by a row of sconces casting soft amber light against expensive wallpaper. Framed photos lined the walls, none of them with me in them. At the far end, a mirror caught my reflection, pale and tense, as if I were looking at a stranger. Halfway to the bathroom, my phone buzzed again. I ducked into a shadowed corner near the coat closet and opened the new message. It's Martha. Don't ask how I got your number. There is something in your drink. They plan to have you sign papers tonight. Legal transfer of your inheritance. You must leave before you can't stand. My breath came faster. Martha, Claire's mother, had barely spoken to me all evening. Yet here she was, warning me about something I didn't even want to believe. I typed quickly, "Are you sure?" Her reply came almost instantly. I heard them. Daniel is in debt. They need your share of the estate. The drink will make you confused, compliant. If you stay, you will lose everything. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. It wasn't just suspicion anymore, this was a plan. And I was sitting right in the middle of it. I glanced back down the hallway toward the dining room. The soft glow of candles spilled into the corridor. I could hear Daniel's laugh, Claire's lighter, higher giggle. They thought they had time. They thought I was just another sip away from making their work easy. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, my mind already racing. There was only one thought that mattered now. I needed to get out before that glass ever touched my lips again. Instead of turning left toward the bathroom, I kept walking. The faint clatter of dishes and the low hum of a refrigerator led me toward the kitchen. Martha stood at the counter, rinsing crystal glasses under warm water, her shoulders tight, her eyes fixed on the sink. She didn't turn when she spoke. "You read my message?" "Yes," I said quietly, stepping closer. Her voice stayed low, barely more than a whisper. "They've been planning this for weeks. Daniel owes hundreds of thousands. Gambling, bad loans. They're going to use you to make it disappear." I swallowed hard. "And the papers?" "Full legal transfer of your share of the estate. Once you sign, it's gone. No going back." My mind spun. "They can't just make me." "The drink," she interrupted, her eyes flicking to the open wine bottle on the counter. "There's something in it. Claire called it docile powder. I don't know the real name. Mixed with alcohol, it clouds your thinking, makes you agree to anything, and you won't remember clearly the next day." The room suddenly felt smaller, the warm kitchen air heavy in my lungs. I leaned closer. "Why are you telling me this?" She finally looked at me, sharp, unwavering. "Because family shouldn't do this to family. Even if you're not mine." In the distance, I heard Daniel's voice from the dining room. "Joseph? Everything all right back there?" I forced my tone steady. "Just washing my hands." Martha reached for a towel, hiding her movements behind the cupboard door. Go out the back. Garden gate opens onto the side street. Don't go back to that table. I hesitated, glancing toward the doorway that led back to the dining room. From here, I could just make out the flicker of candlelight and the faint glint of the crystal glass waiting in front of my seat. They were expecting me to return, to drink, to sign whatever was ready for me. Martha's voice cut through my thoughts. You have one chance, Joseph. Leave now, or you'll regret it. I slipped through the kitchen door Martha had pointed out, the cold night air biting at my face. The scent of roasted meat and spiced wine faded with every step across the frosted grass. The garden was perfectly trimmed even in winter, hedges standing like dark sentries against the snow. At the far end, the black iron gate clicked open under my hand, its hinges silent, as if it had been used for this kind of exit before. I stepped out into a quiet side street, lined with more immaculate houses and parked cars that gleamed under streetlights. My breath rose in pale clouds as I walked quickly toward the corner, my phone already in my hand. Once I was far enough away, I stopped under a lamppost and dialed my attorney. She answered on the second ring, her voice brisk and awake. I told her everything: the dinner, the questions, the drink, the papers I hadn't seen but knew were waiting for me. She told me to keep every message from Martha and to avoid any further contact until we had a plan. Then I called the police. At first, the dispatcher's voice was calm, routine, until I said the words drugged drink and forced signature for inheritance transfer. She asked for the address and assured me a unit could be sent if I wanted to press charges. I promised I would decide soon, but there was something else pressing in my mind. Because as I stood there, away from that glowing, dangerous dining room, the idea of simply going home felt wrong. If I left now, Daniel and Claire would just destroy the evidence and try again. Maybe not with me, but with someone else. And they'd get away with it. I thought about our parents, about how hard they'd worked for what we had. I thought about the fact that the last conversation I might ever have with my brother would be him smiling across a table while trying to rob me blind. No, that wasn't going to be the ending to this. I called the dispatcher back. This is Joseph Miller. I want to proceed. But I need you to meet me there, and I want to walk in before you do. There was a pause, then a measured reply. Understood. Officers will approach on your signal. As I hung up, I looked down the empty street toward where Daniel's house sat, glowing like a stage set behind the trees. I could almost hear the clink of crystal, see the papers waiting on that polished table. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking back, each step crunching in the snow. This Christmas, I wasn't going to be the victim in their story. I was going to write the ending myself. The house glowed ahead of me like nothing had happened. From the outside, it was still a picture, perfect Christmas scene, wreath on the door, golden light spilling from tall windows, faint sound of music drifting into the cold night. But I knew what waited behind that door. I walked up the path slowly, forcing my breathing to steady. When I pressed the bell, the chime rang deep inside, followed by quick footsteps. Daniel opened the door almost immediately, his smile stretched too tight. Joseph, there you are. We were starting to worry. Claire appeared behind him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her eyes scanning my face. I hope you're feeling better. Come on, your drink is still waiting. I stepped inside, brushing snow from my coat. Yeah, I'm fine. Just needed some air. You know how these big meals can be. Daniel chuckled and guided me back toward the dining room, his hand firm on my shoulder. The table looked exactly as I'd left it, candles flickering, plates neatly arranged, my crystal glass refilled and waiting. Claire picked it up and handed it to me herself. To finish what we started, she said softly, almost like a dare. I took the glass, felt the cool weight in my hand. I raised it slightly, letting the candlelight catch the deep red inside. They both watched me, expectant, certain. I brought it to my lips, tilting it just enough for the liquid to touch the rim, but never letting a drop pass my mouth. From outside came the faint crunch of footsteps in snow, then the heavy knock of a fist on the front door. Daniel's smile faltered. Before he could move, the front door opened and 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, followed by a plainclothes detective. "Mr. Joseph Miller?" the detective asked. "That's me," I said, setting the untouched glass back on the table. "You'll find the papers you're looking for in the second drawer of that sideboard," I added, nodding toward the antique cabinet against the wall. Claire's face went pale. Daniel turned to me, his voice sharp. "What the hell is this?" Martha entered quietly from the kitchen, her hands folded, her gaze steady. "I told them everything," she said, her voice calm but unshakable. The officers moved quickly, securing the wine bottle, the glass, and the stack of documents that had been hidden just out of sight. Daniel's composure cracked first, the tight grin collapsing into a snarl. "You can't prove anything," he barked. The detective lifted the wine bottle into an evidence bag. "Oh, I think we can." Claire tried to protest, but Martha's voice cut through. "I heard every word, every plan. And I'm not going to watch you ruin someone else's life the way you tried to ruin his." Daniel was silent now, his jaw set, eyes burning into mine. For a moment, I saw my brother as he'd been years ago, before the greed, before the lies. But that man was gone. I reached for my coat, sliding it on slowly as the officers continued their work. Then I looked at Daniel and Claire one last time. I lifted the empty glass in a mock toast. "Merry Christmas," I said, my voice low but steady. "This year, I'm celebrating my freedom." And with that, I walked out into the cold night, the sound of police voices and the crackle of their radios fading behind me. Snowflakes caught in the glow of street lamps as I headed toward the waiting patrol car. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. Because sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is closing the door for good. 3 weeks after that Christmas night, I walked out of the courthouse with the winter sun warming my face. The wind was sharp, but it felt clean, almost new. Behind me, the heavy wooden doors closed on the trial that had taken less than a day. Daniel and Claire had pleaded guilty when confronted with the overwhelming evidence. The drug analysis, the signed witness statement from Martha, the forged documents with their fingerprints. There would be no appeals, no drawn-out battles. Only sentencing and the slow dismantling of the illusion they had built for themselves. Martha met me on the courthouse steps. She looked smaller somehow, but her eyes were steady. "You did the right thing," she said simply. I shook her hand. "No," I replied. "We did." The reporters were still gathered near the sidewalk, their cameras ready, their questions flying in the cold air. But I didn't stop to talk. The story they wanted was about betrayal and crime. The story I carried was about survival and choice. At home, I set the court's ruling on my desk. The paper that confirmed my inheritance and business holdings were mine, untouched and unchallenged. It wasn't the money that mattered anymore. It was the proof that I hadn't been fooled, that I had acted before it was too late. I poured myself a drink, this time from a bottle I opened myself, and stood by the window, watching the street lights flicker on one by one. The snow had started again, falling in slow, deliberate flakes, covering the city in quiet white. For the first time in years, Christmas no longer felt like something to endure. It felt like something I had taken back. I thought about everything that had happened, the phone buzzing in my pocket, the choice to leave, the decision to return and face them. And I realized something. Sometimes family is not defined by blood, but by the people who stand beside you when it would be easier to walk away. And sometimes, protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's the only way to protect what's worth keeping. I raised my glass toward the night and spoke aloud, as if to myself. Never let anyone else write the ending to your story.